have those to look at. So once again, I'm only recording the notes, none of your faces. So we're going to start with those notes. I see 22 of us have joined. Anyone that's missing, the code is in the top left corner right here. So first part in our notes are biotic versus abiotic factors. So all ecosystems, which is what we're focusing on in ecology, are made of two main types of factors. The first are called biotic factors. And you'll notice the beginning of that word bio is like biology. And biology is the study of living things. Therefore, biotic factors are anything that we find in an environment that are or were once alive. You can see in the picture in your pod some examples. Plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, mushrooms, right? This could also be a tree that's passed away, right? A tree that's been cut down. It might not still be living, but it was once alive and therefore is considered to be biotic. Isabella H., question.
Is a virus or an egg biotic?
Great question. So Isabella H. asked if a virus is a biotic or abiotic. Viruses actually need something else to be living. They can't live on their own. So they are considered abiotic, not living. They don't meet the 6 characteristics of living things. So let's go through some other abiotic factors, some things that were never living. Those include water, soil, air, any rocks or minerals, sunlight. These are things that were never alive and never will be alive. Any questions so far? Okay, awesome. So let's continue on through. So we're going to do our first collaborate board for today. So I'm asking you to draw, write, or find a picture of any biotic factor. Based on what we just filled into our notes, I'm asking for you to help us out and give an example of a biotic factor. Let's see who's going to start us off for today. Oh, whoa, so many responses to start. Let's see. Stella, a dead plant. Yes, Stella, a great example of something that was once living. Benji, you, humans. Anything with cells, Isabella. Very good. Sergey, a picture of people. How perfect. Human, Sienna, including you. Alex Krupkin, a shark. A bumblebee, Maddie, definitely. Hugo, grass, trees. Nick, you. Humans, absolutely. These are some great examples. Drew, that dolphin. Salma, that picture. Is that a bumblebee? What a great addition to our collaborate board. So now that we have some awesome examples of biotic factors, let's do some examples of abiotic factors. So the same thing, draw, write, or find a picture of an abiotic factor. Let's see who's going to start us off. Oh my gosh, some submissions already. Air, Sarah, a rock, water, absolutely. The coronavirus, very good, based on Isabella H's question. Benji, a great picture of a rock. Salma, the moon, the sun, a monsoon, including water, a nearby stone. Really great examples of things that were never living and will never be living. We got a couple more, let's add them in. Lucas, a great example, your phone does not meet the characteristics of living things. A star, ooh, a star is a tough one. Do stars technically reproduce, and therefore would they be considered living? I guess not. That's a great point. Water, rain, dirt, light, rocks, pebbles, a shirt, a sweater. Thunder is considered abiotic, Maddie. Very good, because it doesn't meet all 6 characteristics. A computer, a snowflake. Awesome examples, guys. Let's continue on with our notes. So, in your note sheet, we just filled in a ton of biotic and abiotic factors. Just jot 2 into your biotic factor side of the table in your note sheet and 2 into the abiotic. I'm going to give you a minute to do that, and then we're going to continue on to the levels of organization part of this note sheet. Okay.
Aren't there two different types of organization? Like the scientific classification, like
So
kingdom.
Benji, you're talking about something called taxonomy. And that's how we classify all living things based on their ancestors. That is one type of organization. We are instead talking about the organization of the entire earth right now. So we're going to be focusing on ecosystems within the earth. Katie, I noticed that hand shot up too. What's your question, Katie?
So I never filled in what the abiotic factor is.
Sure, so abiotic is anything not living. Katie, a recording of these notes I'm gonna put up today. So anything that you're missing, this video is gonna be up for you to be able to go back to, okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Benji, another question before we continue?
If your hand has bacteria, like a lot of bacteria, does that make you an ecosystem?
No, so we're gonna go through the 5 main things that all ecosystems must contain, and that'll help answer your question on whether or not we can be considered an ecosystem.
I'm not an ecosystem.
No. So let's start going through. So we keep talking about environments or ecosystems. They're pretty similar. Let's start by defining the term environment. So an environment is the surroundings or conditions in which an organism lives. So I like to think of an environment as a supply list of what we can find there. So think about the environment that you're living in, right? In your environment, you have oxygen, right? That's a condition of where you live. You have shelter. You have grass in your backyard or trees. That's your current environment. So we're going to do some things called levels of organization. And as Benji mentioned, there are many different ways of classifying what's found in this world, the earth, but we're actually going to classify the earth itself. So if you go towards the bottom of your note sheet, there's a bold area that says levels of organization, and then a big empty space. And in that big empty space, I want you to draw a huge circle. It doesn't have to be blue, but draw a giant circle and label it ecosystem. That's going to be the largest level of organization we're going to talk about today. And inside of that circle, you need room for many smaller circles. So make sure it's pretty big.
Wait, where's the big empty space?
So if you scroll down to where in your notes, it says levels of organization. Let me open up a note sheet, and that way I can help you find exactly where that is.
Found it.
You got it?
Yeah.
Okay, still good for me to have one open anyway. So let's take a look. If we're looking through our notes, we've already done a big chunk of these. So scrolling down, we're looking for the part down here. It looks like it's on page 6 that says levels of organization. So it says use the space below to draw circles showing how the earth is separated into many things, starting with an ecosystem. So draw a giant circle and label it ecosystem. So now that you've drawn that big blue oval in your note sheet, I want you to try drawing it here. I want to make sure that we're all on the right track. So in your Nearpod app, please draw that big circle so I can see what you've done in your note sheet. I just want to do a check-in and make sure that we're drawing correctly. So let's see who's going to help us put up that first drawing. Oh, I see Iris is working hard. Lily gave us a great big circle. Beautiful, Lil. Good start. Katie, very nice. Emma, you even made it blue. How awesome. I like how yours has the label ecosystems on it, Stella. Very good. Iris also made it blue. These giant circles are truly looking giant. Lil, I see you added that ecosystem label to yours too. I love that. Benji, I see it in yours, and Maddie and Isabella B. How nice. Awesome. Okay, so now that I've done a little check-in, on how you guys are doing with the drawing aspect. We're going to go through and we're going to define different parts of an ecosystem and draw smaller and smaller circles inside of that giant one. Charlie, I see you even filled yours all the way in. How nice. Sergey, you too. Beautiful. Okay. So we are going to move on to our slide defining that term ecosystem. And Benji, this might help answer your question about why we're not an ecosystem. So an ecosystem is a group of organisms that live in a particular area along with the non-living parts. We therefore can't be considered an ecosystem because we're living, but there's nothing about us as a human that is non-living, so we are missing that abiotic piece. So we're not a full ecosystem. We are a part of that ecosystem. There are many ecosystems throughout the world, and they can overlap with each other. And we're gonna actually talk about an even bigger piece than an ecosystem later in our ecology unit to see where they might overlap. You'll notice that ecosystems have 5 things in common. They all have a source of energy. They all have minerals or nutrients. They all have water. They all have oxygen, and they all contain living things. If any of these are missing, let's think about what might happen. If there's no oxygen, then those living things like humans or animals would have nothing to breathe and they would not survive. If there's no water, once again, the living things are missing a resource they need to survive. If there's no energy, then all of the plants and organisms and every living thing in that ecosystem is not getting what it needs to survive and therefore will die off. Drew, I saw your hand shoot up. What's your question?
Sorry, I was muted. It was nothing.
I'm going to leave this slide up for an extra second. I know this is a longer one. And then since we've spoken about an ecosystem, we're going to get to the next smaller part inside of an ecosystem. So get ready to draw a circle inside of your ecosystem circle. Here we go. So our next smaller level inside of an ecosystem is a habitat. So once again, scroll down to the levels of organization part in your notes. And just like my picture shows, please draw a habitat circle inside of your ecosystem circle. It doesn't have to be gray, but it should be different. So if your ecosystem circle was blue like mine was or Charlie's, then please make your habitat circle a different color. Just like last time, please make sure to label it. Sarah, a question.
Yeah, I didn't get to finish the ecosystem one. What is the last of the 5 basic things the ecosystem needs to survive?
Here you go,
Oh,
Sarah.
living things. Okay, thank you.
For anyone else who's missing any piece, don't forget this recording is going to go up as soon as our class ends today, and therefore you can go back to anything that you need. Okay, so we should be working on that drawing. We're not going to do a check-in on the drawing this time. We're going to skip over a collaborate for this one, but we're going to come back to a collaborate for our next level. We are going to define this word habitat. So who can help me out? Before I pop up the answer, what do you think a habitat is? Alex Sharp, get us started off. What's a habitat?
A habitat is it's a place that needs to live. Like, for example, the habitat of a frog is probably going to be like a pond. And if you put a frog in the desert, or you know, on like a bunch of in a sandbox, then it's gonna die.
Alex, you made so many important points that we're going to get to right now. You gave us a great opening here. So what is a habitat? Alex is right on point. It's a place that an organism lives, but it's especially where it gets its resources. Now, Alex, you gave an awesome example that a habitat for a frog would be a pond. Now, the pond might be just one piece of an ecosystem. If we looked at an ecosystem, it could contain trees, which would be a habitat for birds, but it also could contain a pond in that same ecosystem that would be a habitat for a frog. Alex, you also mentioned that what would happen if we moved a frog to a different habitat, like a desert, and how it wouldn't have the resources it needs there. That was a great point. Isabella H., I saw that hand shoot up. Question or comment?
Many habitats like varied and stuff. For bearded dragons, they have like a more rocky habitat and a sandier one. But if you put a bearded dragon only on sand, they would starve.
Yes, Isabella, very good point to add on to Alex's. There are many different types of habitats. We're going to go through all different types of living areas in a different section of our ecology unit. But you guys make great points, especially when it comes to the resources. Isabella, you added on to Alex's beautifully with another great example with the bearded dragon. If you move where it is, if you take it out of its habitat, it won't have what it needs to survive. So speaking of that, we're taking a look at the habitats just inside of this photo. This photo you can see is considered an ecosystem, a forest ecosystem. But if we actually broke it down into different habitats, there are many. There's this pond or stream where Alex mentioned maybe some frogs or fish live. There's this grassy area where insects or maybe some small mice live. There are trees where birds or chipmunks might live. And maybe there's this house where people might live. So there are all different habitats, living areas, inside of this one ecosystem. I'm going to give you guys a second on this slide. I know it's a long one. And then we're going to cover one more thing that Isabella and Alex mentioned about ecosystems. Okay, so one more thing that Alex and Isabella helped draw our attention to is that we find different organisms in different habitats and we really can't move them from one habitat to another. They wouldn't be able to survive. So different types of organisms have many different needs. The type of shelter they need might be different, whether they're a water animal or a tree animal or a grass animal. The food that they need, they might not be able to find in a different habitat. Their source of energy. So if you think about plants, they need a ton of sunlight to get their energy. What would happen if we moved a plant from its natural habitat into somewhere that had no sunlight? It wouldn't be able to survive. Isabella H., I saw that hand go up again. What's your question or comment?
What invasive species exist? So what if an animal moved to another habitat where they can survive in that habitat?
So Isabella Hope brings up another awesome point. There's something called invasive species that we're also going to touch on later in our ecology unit. And this is when a species, an organism that's not naturally there, gets brought to a new area and takes over the area and steals all of the nutrients from the other organisms. There are some species, Isabella H., that can live in many different habitats, that can be moved. But this is not the case for certain species like your bearded dragon, like a frog that couldn't survive in a desert. Okay, we're going to focus on our next level of organization. So our next smaller one is a community. A community I drew in yellow. If you would like to draw it in a different color, that's fine. Make sure it's inside of your habitat circled and that it's labeled. We are going to do a little check-in drawing for this one. So in this drawing, I want to see that you've drawn 3 circles inside of each other, a big ecosystem, a smaller habitat, and an even smaller community. So give it a shot here. I'm gonna check in on some drawings and see how we're doing. I see Isabella B has got that big ecosystem circle started. Isabella H gave us a beautiful set of 3 different colored circles, as did Alex Sharp. These drawings are looking great. So this makes me feel confident that if you're doing it correctly in this Nearpod, then it looks just as great in that note sheet. So I'm gonna wait for a couple more submissions. Stel, I see those 3 colors. Katie, you too. Sergey, I love the smiley faces added into your drawing. That looks so great. Hugo, beautiful 3 colors. Just make sure, guys, we're not done with our levels of organization. So make sure inside of that community one, you've got enough space for a couple more circles. Isabella B, I love the labels that you put on yours. Really great. So while we're waiting for a couple other people to put their drawings up, why don't we think about what this word community might mean? Alex K, I love how yours is filled in. What is a community? What would you consider to be a community? Think about your community. Who could help me out and give me a great example or definition of a community? Katie, give it a shot for us. What's a community?
It's a group of like people, not people, but a group of living things that work. Okay, sorry. I think it's a group of living things that works together.
Okay, well, I love how Katie started. I'm going to continue with that thought. Not only is it a group of living things, but it's a group of living things that all live near each other. So a community is a group of all different living things that all live in the same area. That's the most important. They live in the same area. So you might have trees and grass and lions and zebras and hawks and people, all different groups of living things, all different populations, but they all live in the same area. Now you'll notice I didn't mention any rocks or any sunlight or air. The community only contains the living things in the area. Only the living things. Would that be abiotic or biotic if it's only the living things? Who could help me out? Isabella H, I'd love your participation today. Are living things the biotic or abiotic?
Biotic.
Absolutely, very good. So you'll notice we didn't name any abiotic parts in a community. Okay, we've got 2 more quick circles to put in. And then we're done with notes for today. So smaller than a community is a population. So once again, inside of your community circle, draw your population circle in a different color, label it population, leaving enough room for just 1 more circle inside. We just need 1 more circle space. And then when you're ready, I'd love for someone to help me out. Now that we know that a community is a group of all different living organisms living in the same area, who could help us out and tell us what a population is? What is a population? Drew, I saw that hand go up. Drew, do you want to help us out? What is a population?
A population is a group of the same species.
Very good, Drew. So Drew brought us right along to our next slide. A population, great use of the word species, Drew, is a group of the same species living in the same area. So you'll notice in this picture, what is the population? It's a population of what?
Giraffes.
Okay, thanks, Alex. Don't forget to raise your hand. Very good. It is
Sorry.
giraffes, right? So you'll notice that when I named the population, as Alex said, it's just the giraffes. I didn't name the grass. I didn't name the trees because that would be a community of different organisms. Alex Sharp, a question or comment?
No.
Yeah, okay. So a species is a group of organisms that are physically similar. They have similar characteristics. They also can reproduce to make more of themselves. Lily, question.
If you have like, say birds, if you have a group of birds, would you call them birds or would you classify each different type of bird?
Great question. Each different type of bird is its own population, its own species. So if I had many different types of birds, that would actually be a community right there.
I have another question about birds,
Yeah.
but it's similar, I guess. There are different types of bird groups in the bird species. Like, for example, there are, I don't know how to pronounce half of them though, but I have a big book about it. So there are just a whole bunch of, so if you have one of the groups inside of the whole species that only includes in like 2 or 3 species of birds, would that be considered a population?
A community, yes. Each individual species of birds is its own population. But if you have more than one type of bird in the same area, that would be a community.
All right.
Like you'd have the community of like a genus of finches, but a population would be a red finch and a house finch.
Exactly, Isabella. Very good. Now you're using some words, genus, that Benji had mentioned before in taxonomy. Okay, we're almost out of time. I only have one slide left. So let me quickly get to that last slide. Here we go. So would white-tailed deer living in a forest in Pennsylvania be members of the same population as white-tailed deer living in Maine? Now I noticed the answer popped up. I'm not sure how to prevent that. So I guess we'll go through the answer together. So even though they are both white-tailed deer, the same species, because they live in different areas, they are technically not the same population. Because remember that part of the population definition is that these animals live close to each other. The last thing we need to do before we run out of time, I'm going to explain it while I leave this slide up for you to fill in, is we need to draw one more circle in the middle of all of our circles. Does anybody know what our smallest level of organization would be here? Nick, help us out here. What would our next smallest circle be?
Species.
So a species is actually a group of organisms. Those would fall into population. What's even smaller than a group of organisms? Sergey?
One organism?
One organism, very good. So I'm gonna skip to that slide. This should be what our final circle looks like with our white organism or any color organism circle inside. I'm gonna post these slides right now. So if I move too quickly for anyone, or if you need to go back to something, I'm gonna post this PowerPoint right now for you guys to take a look at on your own time. Once you fill in your organism circle, you guys are good to go for today. Any questions before we log off for today? Alex Sharp, yes.
Is it possible for a multicellular organism to